Well, welcome. Jane Kuckel, Dr. Kuckel will not be with us this afternoon, and Mr. Teuber will be joining us shortly. This is a workshop of the school board to conduct an interview of a school board attorney candidate. And Dr. Pruitt has put the process together for us, and so I'm going to ask her to take over and explain the process as we'll use it today.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. So what we're going to be doing this afternoon is it's primarily what we refer to as a targeted selection interview process. Some of the questions are very targeted selection oriented, some are experiential, and some are trying to get a little bit more at maybe philosophy of the candidate. And so the questions are a compilation of input that I receive from board members and then just some best practice type questions. And my recommendation is that we will, the 6 of you or 5 of you to start, we will round robin the questions, and I will also provide the candidate a copy so that he can see, because sometimes it helps to be able to see the questions in front of you. And then what I'm going to ask you to do is to make notes and then score those questions based on the criteria. If you look at the bottom of each page, you can see there, because it's important if you're going to use some type of rating scale to have an indication of how you're using those numbers. And so basically we're looking at this as an entry-level or first-time school board attorney. If you feel that his response meets the job requirements for this position, it's an acceptable level for you as a board member, then you would give that a 3. And then I kind of say use that as your what is acceptable, and then if it's above that, you would then give a 4 or 5. If you feel it does not adequately do that, then you would give a 2, 1. And a 0 would be if you ask the question and the candidate just, sometimes the candidate just says, I just don't have an answer for that question. And that would be when you would, or they completely answer it in a different way. What I would say to you is it is perfectly appropriate if the candidate answers the question, but you feel that you want to probe a little further, you can ask a follow-up question or say, can you please expand on that a little bit further? I would also recommend that due to the nature of this scenario, that if it's not your question, but you still feel you need a follow-up, that you please just do so, because the goal here really is to determine, is this candidate meeting your needs for the role of school board attorney. And so the only thing we would want to stay away from are any questions that we feel would be, not appropriate in any interview setting. Those typical questions about, religious beliefs, about personal situations and things like that, that we would want to stay away from those. If I feel that a question comes up that I don't feel is appropriate, I will simply interject and say, can we move on to another question, or I'll say something that would be appropriate, just so that we're all making sure we're not asking anything that wouldn't be appropriate. As always, remember this will be public record, so anything that you write down on the paper, just know that it will be memorialized, and so keep that in mind as you're putting your notes. I like to recommend that your notes, excuse me, your notes, if you feel that you're going to give a 2 or a 1 or a 0, then that's what your notes would reflect. If you're going to give a 4 or a 5, then your notes would reflect, great response to this or something, so that if the candidate was looking for feedback later, we could say, well, several, board members put on this question that you really didn't answer it, or your details weren't, you didn't provide a specific example or whatever, so that we could provide appropriate feedback, if the situation requires it. There are 12 questions, and then there's an opening question and a closing question, so really 14 questions. So we have more than adequate time, because even if he spends 5 minutes, which is a really long time, on a question, we have, that would be done in 70 minutes, so we certainly have enough time. Are there any questions?
So I just want to clarify, I have a couple of questions that are not on here, but could be related to one of these categories. Just fit it in there at that time if I feel like.
If it's appropriate to the question. If it's something that I think wouldn't be appropriate, like I said, then I'll just say something and let you know that.
Yeah. It'll be appropriate.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Mr. Teuber's about 30 minutes away.
30 minutes? We're going to start. Yep,
He can go back, right, watch the tape?
that's true, he can.
He can, and he's provided me some very specific feedback from his one-on-one, so I feel comfortable moving forward at this time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ask Rob to come in. Thank you. Would you like me to tell him how it's going to go, or do you? Okay.
Are you going to do the math for us, or do I have to do the math?
No music or anything?
No.
We could, I always say we have music in the office.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dodig. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How is everybody?
Good.
Good.
Just want to give you a little insight as to what we're going to be doing here this afternoon.
Perfect.
We're going to be, as you can tell, engaging in a panel interview, and the questions are going to be primarily targeted selection based, or and I've got a copy here in case you need to
Perfect.
refer to them. And they're going to round robin the questions. They're going to be taking notes as you're talking, so they may not be giving you, direct eye contact while you're talking. If you would like any clarification or, anything, then just please let that board member know.
Sure.
If another board member would like to ask a follow-up question, they will do so at the time that the question is being asked. So even though it's a particular board member's turn, you may hear from other board members as well. Did you have any questions before we begin?
I don't.
Okay. All right, let's get started.
Okay.
So I'll begin.
And then we'll just,
Mr. Dodig, this is the opening question. Would you please tell us briefly why you are interested in this position? What skill sets, talents, and work experiences make you the ideal candidate for this position?
Well, thank you. First of all, let me thank all of you for the opportunity to be here today. It is an honor to be here. To answer your question, and I think it's important to note that I had individual conversations with all of you, so some of this may be repetitive, but when you're 49 years old and have been toiling away as a lawyer for 24 years, there's times in your career where you have to go all in. And for 13 years, I've been the staff attorney, as you all know, and I have learned so much and had the opportunity to work for 5 superintendents, numerous board members, and have developed, I think, the ability in my current job to communicate with all people in all walks of life. And the second question is about skill sets and talents. My talent and skill set lies in my ability to communicate. I also have, I believe, a skill set that lends itself to teaching, to mentoring, and I think I said to at least one of you in my individual meeting, I take pride in the word counsel. When people call me counsel, that goes right to my heart. I believe in the ability of a lawyer to counsel their clients. And although a school board is unique in that you're an entity that is a collection of 7 individuals, you need to work together. And I believe as an attorney, the collective advice I can provide to all of you will be able to, it'll allow you to understand why I'm saying what I'm saying today about myself. Because I think I have the ability to bring people together, and I also think I have the ability to lead. Now, that may not be the point of this job, but I think they're important in a lawyer's ability to communicate with their client. And so those are the things that I bring to this job. Why I'm interested in the position? Well, I think I told all of you, little anecdote, I always bring up sports. Not that I'm in the minor leagues now, but kind of in AAA, it's time to go to the majors. It's time for me as a lawyer to step into a position that, in essence, for 24 years, I feel like I've been preparing for. And I'd be able to, if that satisfies the answer, but I can answer anything else you might want me to answer.
Good answer.
Thank you.
Where do you feel that you would take the board attorney position in the next 5 years? And please provide some examples regarding advocacy, district legal services, and training.
Well, I think some of the things that the board attorney can do are within the restraints or the constraints of what we face. Now, I believe, and I think all of this may have come out in other forums, I believe this district is underserved legally in-house. I believe that a district with almost 100,000 students and 12,000 employees should avail itself of in-house legal counsel more than 2 attorneys. I'm fond of saying that I've been here 13 years, and after about 8 years, we had 3 lawyers, and now we only have 2. We've gone backwards. In my time here, we've added 25,000 students. So the question, which is somewhat open-ended, where would you take the board attorney position, is I envision a legal department for this school district. And how the board attorney fits into that is the board attorney should have, at some point, additional counsel under him or her. I believe that's how it should evolve. So if the board attorney takes a vacation or if someone's out of the office, you all still have access to someone, although nowadays we have really 24/7 access to everybody. But I think there's a need for lawyers to collaborate. I think good lawyers in a good working situation have other lawyers to collaborate with. I just believe it's necessary to talk about legal issues, it's necessary to talk about the law, it's necessary to talk about political and social issues and the implications of decisions. And with only 2 lawyers and the current setup being divided the way we have it divided, that setup doesn't necessarily lend itself to that. So I envision in 5 years a legal division for this school district, but of course, knowing full well, we are strained for money, we are in the business of educating children, and that's the primary business here. It's not lawyers, and it never should be. However, I think, and I said this to at least 1 or 2 of you, we need to grow up as a school district. We're no longer a little school district in a small little town. This is big business here, and I think we need to treat legal services similarly. Advocacy, well, you may be able to tell in the short time we've been talking today, I'm an advocate. That's what I believe in. That's why I went to law school. Tell you a little bit about my past. I was a legal aid attorney. My first job was representing poor people in landlord-tenant cases and special education cases, and I was in court all the time. I then went to work for the state of New York, or I was in private practice for a brief period of time representing the Flagler County School District, and kind of, as they say, went to the dark side and started representing school districts. And in that job, I was charged with basically providing everyday representation to the school district. The senior partner was the board attorney. Then I became a legal aid attorney again in New York, and once again was handling poverty law issues, which involve tremendous advocacy because you're fighting against the establishment in those jobs. Landlords trying to evict tenants, folks trying to get food stamps or public benefits. Then I went to work for the state of New York, and I was an advocate for the state of New York dealing with children that were incarcerated by the state of New York. I eventually became their ombudsman, and I was then the representative that all of the children contacted when they had a problem with their facility that they were incarcerated in, whether it was mail or talking to their parents or the ability to simply get free time or recess, their schooling. So I had to advocate on behalf of all of those young men and women, okay, that with the agency that I worked for, which was an interesting juxtaposition, which has really helped me tremendously in my current job as the staff attorney, because there are times when I have to provide bad news to folks and say, look, at that school something happened and it was wrong, and we violated a student or a parent's rights, and we have to move on and do better. Regarding training, I think this is one area where something in the board's philosophy, I think it's board policy 1.06, talks about being proactive and not reactive. It's one of the philosophies of you all as a board. And proactive to me means training. When I was in Dr. Pruitt's department in HR, I did a lot more training than I do now in the position I'm in, as the staff attorney in the superintendent's office. But I think you all could benefit from training, just in this setting. Let's talk about some issues or perceptions that you have of a certain law, and how does that work? And sit down. I mean, I enjoy teaching. In fact, tomorrow night I'm starting to teach for FGCU. So I've taught at Ave Maria and Nova, and that's one of, I believe, my strengths also, is teaching. So I think we can be much more proactive in the world of legal services relative to what board members confront and have to deal with. I know those are long-winded answers.
No, they're very good.
Okay.
And there's 14 questions, and we have till 3 o'clock.
Oh, okay, all right.
And we want-
All your time.
and we need details, so that's important.
I thought that was an excellent response. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Would you give us a specific example of a time that your personal beliefs were in conflict with the position you had to take in your role as staff attorney? How did you handle it? What was the outcome?
Well, I think that's a great question, and I think that's not hard for me to dig down and find an answer. If any of you know or don't know, I happen to be an advocate on LGBTQ issues. I believe strongly on those issues, and that comes from when I worked in the state of New York. I dealt with a lot of LGBTQ students, and when the president issued the edict regarding, President Obama at the time, the edict regarding bathrooms and how gender identity should be dealt with in school districts, I thought that was a positive step. I thought we were headed in the right direction. Well, subsequently to that, the country elected a new president who issued a follow-up memo and really rescinded the guidance from the Obama administration. Well, I will tell you that I will follow that edict. That is currently, at least as far as things are concerned right now, the state of this issue. There's not a lot we can do about that issue. However, that may conflict with my personal beliefs. But my job as a board attorney, or even now as the staff attorney, is to provide advice based on the current state of the law. And in doing so, I will be honest and with the utmost integrity do that. I have no problem in doing that. My personal beliefs are irrelevant in that situation, and they need to be irrelevant. Okay? Now, I deal all the time with people that have a lot of different opinions as the staff attorney. I mean, I'm dealing with school administrators, and so their minds are everywhere on a lot of different issues politically and socially because our people, they're educators, they're aware of what's going on around them. So that's a common thing for a lawyer. I mean, you have to advocate the position of your client, which I think I've been able to do. I told you and explained I've been on both sides of special education issues. I've represented parents and I've represented students. There are times in my job where we have collectively determined that an employee should be terminated. I may not personally have believed that, but I have advocated that position. I have gone to due process hearings on those issues in front of DOA, and we have prevailed. And we have prevailed. And looking back, I say to myself, well, I probably wouldn't have gone that way, but the folks, the administrators that make those decisions, I don't make decisions as an attorney. I undertake and do what my client wants me to do. They were right. So that's really, I mean, I could give you countless times when that has occurred. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you think that it shows an error in judgment that you like the Giants? Just kidding. Just
And we were 3 and
Ms.
13, so
Patriga,
yeah.
that question is not appropriate.
We were 3 and 13, so yes, yes. But that's my father's error in judgment.
Communication is often cited by many board members as a critical element to the healthy board member/attorney relationship. Explain how you plan to communicate with the board as a whole and also individual board members.
It's a great question, and I know Mr. Martin has done things for 19 years his way, and I think that way may work for all of you, but I think what's important is for me to ask all of you as a client, if I'm honored to be selected as the board attorney, to ask all of you how you want to be communicated to. I think that's of utmost importance. Having said that, I pride myself on communication. I know a number of you meet with the superintendent weekly, and I don't think there's any reason I can't piggyback on those meetings. So if, like, Ms. Morgan comes in at 3 o'clock, she can meet with me at 4 o'clock. I think it's important. And even if it's just to touch base on a weekly basis and there's nothing hot going on, I think it's important to just have those lines of communication. I'm one that likes to sit down and learn about people. I think it's important for me to know you all and what makes you tick and what you believe in as a board member and what led you to run for office and become elected and what your issues are that you feel strongly about. I think that's so important for me to know as the board attorney. I do agree with the question. It is a critical element. I don't believe there's things that you should find out in some other way when if I had that information, I could have told you. I just don't think that's appropriate. And I think a happy client is an informed client. I've said that to you all. I think information is valuable. You're elected officials. You have to answer to the public. You need to know things. You need to know things. And I think within parameters, obviously, sometimes there's things that may or may not be able to be out there, but you take that information and you do with it what you need to do. And I would provide advice saying, I'm telling you this, however, this is student information that's not public, and you can't provide that in a public forum.
What do you believe to be your greatest strength that you have not been able to do fully maximize as a staff attorney? How will this strength be applicable as the board attorney?
I'm thinking because I think there's a few. But I will say, I think my greatest strength, I talked about communication. I don't want to talk about that again. I think I want to talk about leadership. And I have, I think, leadership skills that as the staff attorney, I haven't been able to exhibit because I'm part of a big, huge team. And I have said this in plenty of cabinet meetings, and I've said this in other forums. Not everybody can be the third hitter on the team. Not everybody can be the quarterback. Not everybody can be LeBron James, the best player on the court. Everybody has a role, okay? And I am fully cognizant of that, and I take my role as it is as the staff attorney. But having said that, there are ways in which we as human beings can blossom. And one of the ways I can blossom is the ability to exhibit leadership skills for you all as a board. Now, I don't for 1 minute intend to spend one day in your shoes. That's not my job. But I do believe public bodies in some way need to be led, because you all ran for this position with your own issues and what you think, but we have all been here, and we know the system. And if I can use that to lead you in some way as a lawyer, because I'm not the superintendent, that's your other employee, I think that's something that's one of my great strengths that you as a board can benefit from. I really believe that, yes.
Can you talk to the decision that the board made to vote, let's see, what was the superintendent's recommendation to opt out of the Common Core? There's, we had a recommendation from the attorney. The board took an action that was not necessary. I'm just curious how
You mean the testing issue?
the testing issue, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, I think on that issue, I'm probably reluctant to tell you exactly how I would have advised you. I think.
I'm putting you in an awkward spot
Yeah,
with respect
but
to
I think once again we're getting back to information, and we're getting back to the law and the rules, and I'll be honest with you, in my job, and I can't disclose what I may have advised the superintendent. I just can't do that, or what that communication back to me was. But there was scrambling going on to figure out what the rules and even what we did and didn't have to do going on at that time. And I think if there's anything that could have been done is there could have been more of an education piece at the board table, okay? And I say that knowing, and I think you all know this full well, that I have the utmost respect for Mr. Martin, and I have the utmost respect for the job that he's in. But I don't think there was a fully informed board or public, for that matter, on that issue. I think emotions got carried away. I think it's a divisive issue. And I think fully informed board may be saying, hold on, let's breathe. Do we have to make decisions tonight? There's motions flying. I think leadership in that respect may have been able to make things a little bit better. I mean, it's a divisive issue, so I don't know if you're ever going to get a totally clean situation there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Comes to me, I know. I'm
Yeah,
finishing my
I saw you were
notes, so
still
please forgive me.
Yeah. Take your time.
I'm taking diligent notes.
I'm glad.
How would you handle a situation where you and a board member disagreed about either an issue or a course of action?
Well, I think those are two different things, an issue or a course of action. I don't know who wrote the questions, I'm not criticizing them. But I think a course of action is much more significant than disagreeing on an issue.
Yeah.
A course of action suggests you're doing something. And one of the things that I wanted to tell you all today is I read your board protocols and I've reviewed them. And I think there's a great chart in there that was provided by the Florida School Boards Association about the division of powers, if you will, between a board and a superintendent. And the thing I got from that, which I've always known, is that you recommend, you suggest, but the folks on the administrative side of the district act, okay? So a course of action suggests you're acting in some way, which I'll just simply, I guess, talk about an issue. I don't think what I believe or the advice I provide you, if it's followed or not, should put me in a situation where I have an issue with that. I provide legal advice to you as a board. You can question that. You can ask me more questions about it. You can suggest that you don't think that's the right way to do things. And none of that, honestly, will hurt my feelings. I think the key is for me to be well thought out, to research and provide you the best advice that I think I can provide and that I will provide, and use all the resources that I have, including colleagues in other districts and the ability to dig down for 24 years of my experiences and provide you advice. If you disagree with my course of action, that's okay. That happens. If you're not an advocate for your client, that will never happen because you're not putting yourself out there. But your job as a lawyer is to advocate a position that you think is in the best interest of your client. And if you as a board take a position that's contrary to the legal advice of the board attorney, that's the board's decision. And I would certainly live with that. And I would be happy to explain all of that to you individually if that in fact comes up. But I am not going to ever provide you legal advice that I think you want to hear. That's not my job. That is not my job. It may make me unpopular in some respects, but I think in the long run, and this is what it's about, right? The long run, ultimately, and I've done that here for 13 years. In the long run, I believe the advice I've provided to my clients in this school district, they realize he was right about that one, but I may have been wrong about others. I hope that satisfies the question.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I can't be in two places at the same time.
No, that's okay. No, I appreciate you scrambling to get here, I really do.
We're at the top of page 4.
I just want to say, I provided some questions. I asked Mr. Dodick some questions when we were together, and the way he responded, I felt it was very important, so I submitted those to Dr. Pruitt so that you could, because I wanted him to articulate, and I let him know that those questions are going to be asked again, because I felt those issues were important for him to articulate to the whole group. So.
Thank you.
You're up, Karen. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Steve was next.
I was kidding.
She was
I
teasing.
said it.
That was a joke.
That was my fault.
Okay, then, from a legal perspective, what do you believe is the weakest area of this and most school boards? How can you assist in improving on that weakness?
Wow. Up till 3 o'clock? No. Not about you all. In fact, I do want to say this. I've been here 13 years, and I have worked under or with some cohesive boards, some of which you have been members of, at least Mr. Teuber and Dr. Kuckel. However, I will say that currently, this is as cohesive and as good a board as I've seen in this district in my 13 years. So I'm not blowing smoke, I just want you to know that. The weakest area, I don't know if I can identify a weak area of this board currently. I think, I'm sure I can come up with one offhand. I do say this, I think the weakness of the system, okay, and I'm not necessarily advocating this, and I'm stealing this from one of your colleagues, but I do think the weakness of the system is the elected nature of school boards in general relative to the politics and all that goes on. The university and college system in Florida with appointed boards of trustees seems to work more fluently. There's not a lot of politics going on, at least in the public. It seems to, they seem to be able to have some harmony and get things done at that level, okay? Having said that, the system's not changing, so I'm well aware of that. So I think the weaknesses of most school boards that I am familiar with is something we've talked about, which is those boundaries, that line, that blurs, and the line between taking administrative action and being a board member, advising, or coming up with recommendations. I think that's the weaknesses of a school boards in general, because you have to answer to the public, and that's okay. That's who you were elected by. However, there has to be trust in administration and staff, and the board attorney for that matter, and the superintendent, that things will be handled appropriately. So I have seen in my 13 years here that line get blurred, and that's when things become confusing. I had graciously a board member ask me the other day, for lack of knowing, can I talk to you about this situation that was coming from my office? And I appreciated that question because I understood that the board member would not know. And my answer was respectfully, I can't talk to you about that because it could come before you as a quasi-judicial body. And so I think those questions are important for board members to ask legal advisors. But I do understand the system. I think I bring up the university and college system because those folks are not elected, so therefore not held, their constituents are not bothering them all the time, I guess, so to speak, or asking questions. But that's the democratic system we have. It seems to work in some respects, and but I think that's a weakness for most school boards. For you all, I mean, I see good work being done. I think the dilemma and the weakness for our school board is not inflicted by you all. It's being inflicted by Tallahassee. It's pulling control away from a local school board and suggesting that someone else can make better decisions on things like funding and other issues. And I think that is the inherent threat to our system. You all eventually are not going to have a lot of things to do if that continues. And that is a weakness in our system, not in you as a school board. I think that's been brought upon you. Now, how can I improve it? Well, how can I assist you in improving on that weakness? I want to answer this part of that question. I think, like I told you, one of my skills is leading. One of my skills is providing advice that is not only the legal aspects of what a school board can and cannot do, but I think I have the ability to determine or at least look at the social and political ramifications of everything you all do. I am an information person. Input is one of my big strengths, and I like information. I can sort of tell what's going on. I have, unfortunately, I watch too much news and watch what's going on in the world, but I think that can benefit the board. I really do, and I think that can assist maybe improving on the weakness. I mean, I've been trying to improve on the weakness by helping with the legislative part of this school district, and feel very strongly and passionate about public education. I'm a product of it, and I think you all are fighting, and we need to continue to fight. Absolutely. Hey.
Could I interject at this time? So Being that as the board attorney, you will be working with the superintendent on a daily basis, so how would you maintain the fact that you really report directly to the board?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I hopefully answered that individually with all of you. But the current superintendent and I go back 13 years. I was sitting in his office 13 years ago interviewing for the staff attorney job. I won't hide that. He's been a big benefit to my career, and I appreciate everything. However, one thing that I think I made clear to you is Dr. Atkins and I haven't always seen eye to eye on issues. I've had plenty of disagreements with him. I've had plenty of issues with him. Not that's how I will deal with him, but I think it's clear that a separation between the board attorney and the superintendent in some respects is necessary. However, what I will say is the collaboration between the two positions, as it is currently constituted, needs to improve. And I think I can be a benefit to Dr. Atkins. However, that benefit only goes to the point where I believe I can go with what my client wants to do as a school board. There will be times when the school board and the superintendent are not on the same sheet of paper. And my job is to advise the school board. However, we are the only two employees currently. There's an auditor position. We're the only two employees, I shouldn't say we, the school board attorney and the superintendent are the only two employees of this board.
Right.
So there is some synergy that's necessary. There's a reason for that. And if you look at the job description, if you look at the board protocols, the superintendent and the school board attorney are supposed to work pretty much together. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that really work in this district. And I think we can improve upon that.
So then my second question is a follow-up to that. If there was a recommendation coming from the superintendent that was not in compliance with the law, not a good recommendation, would you advise the board in advance?
Yes, and I would advise the superintendent in advance.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How would you stay current on legal issues that could potentially affect the school district? And what about legislation?
Well, the first question is, I think we all today have the ability to stay current on legal issues, not just lawyers. The internet and the World Wide Web, which unfortunately or fortunately has kind of grew up with me career-wise. I think when I was in law school, we had Westlaw or Nexus, but it wasn't like it is now, and you could pretty much read a case without paying for it today. You never used to even be able to do that. So as I told you, I'm an input person, I'm an information person, so I do stay current on legal issues relative to the news and other sources. The Florida School Board Attorneys Association, of which I've been a member for 13 years, is an invaluable resource to us. It's kind of a parallel organization to FSBA. FADS, the Superintendent's Association, Joy Frank, their legal counsel, is an invaluable resource. We have school board attorneys that have, believe it or not, we have some emeritus folks, Ned Julian and others. Ned's been a school board attorney for about 70 years, I think he was, and he still participates on our listserv where we exchange information with each other, and something's, hey, is this happening with you all? No, but maybe it will. And that's how we kind of find trickle-down information. There's plenty of folks that like to make public records requests around the state in every school district. Some districts get them before we do. Well, we know that kind of thing is probably coming. So that's an invaluable resource. I attend conferences. FSBAA has quarterly meetings that I attend. I belong to the Council of School Attorneys, COSA, which is under the National School Boards Association. So I try, albeit in my current position, which sometimes is like triaging in an emergency room, but I try to read an hour or so a day on relevant case law and things that are going on that are relevant to school districts. So I think all of those things help me stay current. Legislation, as you know, for at least the past 2 years, I've been intimately associated with handling, or at least trying to be the liaison for the school district relative to our lobbyists, previously with Mr. Sarah and now with Ms. Green. Legislation is kind of interesting because you can get surprised. We had some surprises this year, finding out things through other sources and things, which I feel like maybe should never happen, but it seems to. So especially at the end of session when things get stuffed in bills or others. One of you Ms. Patrica actually, would email and say, when did this get put in this? And sometimes you have to dig and find out, that was brought up in a committee or never even went to committee. So that is a little bit more of a difficult chore. And I think, and I've advocated with all of you, I think, that I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea to have an in-house person dedicated to that kind of role full-time. I've thought that. I believe in that. I've expressed that to the superintendent. But as the board attorney, I would be certainly on top of all of that. And I think in the new job description, some of that is in there, which, if I was honored to get the position, I'm real happy about, because I kind of enjoy that world. I know that sounds maybe sadistic in this climate, but I enjoy knowing what laws are going to be passed or possibly passed. So I would look forward to that.
May I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
When you say a full-time in-house person, you don't need another attorney, or do you?
No, I don't mean another attorney, not necessarily, no. I think a person with legal background would be helpful. Of course, I always advocate for lawyers, but no, I don't think so. I think there was some thought given. In fact, I participated on the interview committees for a legislative person that was also going to be a community relations type person, some of which Dr. Carlin has undertaken. And I think we had some real great candidates that we offered positions to, and they chose not to come here, unfortunately. So I think that position, I know this year that's probably not possible, but I think it should still be in the mix. I really believe that. And I think that would not only aid our current lobbyist, it would aid folks in-house here too. Yeah.
I have another follow-up,
Sure.
if I may. I haven't practiced law in 19 years, but I remember when I first got out, CLEs were required. Are you still doing CLEs or
Sure am, yeah.
continuing legal education?
Yeah, state of Florida, and Mr. Toiber might be able to tell, 30 credits every 2 years, and I'm also admitted in New York. However, I don't have to participate in CLE in New York because I don't practice there currently, but I still have to pay dues in New York.
That'll never go away.
Thank
No, you're welcome.
What has been the most stressful situation you have ever found yourself in at work? How did you handle it?
Well, what time is it? Other than about 50 minutes ago. No, I'm just kidding. Well, it's a great question because my current job doesn't come without stress. And I'm not going to necessarily talk specifics. I don't think that's fair to people involved. But you all know in general sense that we had a significant cycle of superintendents over the past 4 or 5 years, 6 years. And during one of the terms of that superintendent, things around here got pretty stressful. And how did I handle it? Well, I think we seek out folks that we love and care about and that love us and care about them. And I think talking about things is the best way to handle stress. I think we can seek out professionals to do that. We can talk to our loved ones. We can deal with our issues the way we think is best. Some people pray, some people, whatever works for people. What works for me is talking about things. And what also works for me, as bizarre as this may sound, is the truth and honesty, because they will always set you free. And so if you're in a stressful situation and you're honest with yourself and you're honest and truthful with what occurred, I'm not going to lie, I had to go speak to the Inspector General about that superintendent's situation, and I told them what was happening. And there's no more liberating a feeling than doing that. So you handle it with the truth. You're honest. And I don't think you'll ever go wrong. And I pledge to you that I would always do that with you all.
Tell me about a situation where you had to solve a difficult problem. What did you do? What was the outcome? And what do you wish you would have done differently?
Oh, boy. I'm not necessarily in the position of solving problems. I think I'm in the position of providing advice that will allow others to solve problems. I think, but there's, throughout life, it doesn't say at work necessarily. I mean, I think I went through a divorce in my life. There's no more difficult a problem in a person's life, even death. I think divorce is more difficult than a death. And the outcome for me was I had to go back to my family. I had to be around the people that loved me. And the outcome was I met my wife, I had a child, I moved back to Florida. I've been in this wonderful county for 13 years. What I wish I had done differently is I wish my first marriage worked. My ex-wife is a special education teacher in Volusia County. She's a wonderful person. I'll never know why it didn't work.
When was the last time you thought outside the box, and how did you do it, and why?
About 3 seconds ago. Honestly, I had no intentions of answering a question that way, but I thought it's important to not just talk about work all the time. I think you're hiring an attorney who's also a person, and I think it's important for you all to know that. Lawyers, it's a great question because lawyers don't get to think outside the box very often. We're in that box. One thing I'm fond of saying, although I know other people in other professions may quite, you're always a lawyer. And I know we have a couple in this room. I mean, even when you're home, even when you're outside your job or where you work, your office or court or wherever you do your business, but you're always a lawyer. So the ability to think outside the box professionally for me is very difficult to tell you that, oh yeah, I've done that 10 times this week. No, that's not reality. You cannot provide the proper legal counsel and advice with your client if you're constantly coming up with outside-the-box thinking. That's not what a client needs to hear. Now, there are people in this school district that are in jobs, including Dr. Pruitt and others, where thinking outside the box is part of their job. And then what they do is they consult legal counsel and say, hey, is this okay? Do you think we can do this? Do you think it's okay to go to the legislature and ask them to pay for scholarships for students? That may not seem outside the box now, but it was when we first thought of it. Absolutely. And I was a part of that. Do you think it's outside the box to go to a job fair and offer people contracts on the spot? When I came here and we started discussing that, I thought that was a little bit risky. But then when I heard there's 500 or 600 job openings a year, by all means, let's figure out a way to do that. And I participated in drafting the job offer document that we currently use, and it's been refined over the years. So the last time I thought outside the box, honestly, was when I answered your question about the previous question that Mr. Teuber asked about difficult problems. So not long ago. But I think in my personal life, I think outside the box often, but I don't think a lawyer can do it necessarily all the time professionally. I just don't think, you're not coming to me, I don't think, Ms. Giovanelli, to say, hey, come up with a novel legal idea for this. If you are, then by all means tell me and we'll try to do that. But I think you're coming to me for consistent, clear, zealous advocacy and advice. That's what I think a lawyer should be doing. I'm just reading the next one.
Excuse me. Mr. Dodick, would you tell us about a time that your tenacity or resilience really paid off during your time as staff attorney? What was the outcome?
Well, I think I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to bifurcate the question, so to speak. I think tenacity and resilience. I think tenacity, I can tell you over the years, I've been tenacious in advising, certainly human resources, on certain issues relative to what's appropriate, for instance, on our employment application. There was a time, okay, when we asked individuals what their date of graduation from high school was on an application. And we were advised by the EOC and the Lee County Office of Equal Opportunity, which existed at the time, that it's easy to determine how old someone is by their date of graduation from high school. And that could lead to an age discrimination claim. Well, and Dr. Pruitt still has these meetings, but when I was in HR, there was always Friday meetings with the leadership group in HR, and I was part of that. Dr. Atkins was there at the time. And I was tenacious in telling our folks in personnel and our computer folks that dealt with the online applications that you need to remove that question. Well, back then we had a system called Monocular, and the computer system was very difficult to manipulate. Well, that took a long time to remove. But I constantly was today, it comes to mind because I wasn't here that long at that point, and I kept thinking to myself, boy, they must really think I'm like totally overbearing on this issue. And it came to mind as soon as you said that I was just tenacious about us making sure that that problem was cured. And honestly, age discrimination based on that kind of thing never did come about in any of our cases. But I've also been tenacious, I think, in advocating in my job, as crazy as this sounds, because I do represent the district, but advocating for those groups that are marginalized in our community. I feel as though we're on the cusp of an agreement with the NAACP, and I think the resilience and tenacity of people like myself and Dr. Bohatch and others is finally going to pay off. And I think an agreement is great, but we need to continue to move forward. We need to continue to move forward for those young children that I hear about every night from my wife that come to Edgewood Elementary that can't speak English, whose parents can't speak English, and we have to enroll them and provide them the best education we can. Well, what are we going to do about that issue? And we need to move forward, and we need to continue to be tenacious about those issues. Currently, I think we're confronted with an issue going on in our public schools regarding violence that we've never seen before. And what are we going to do about those issues? We can pass bills like 7026 and not fund them enough and say this is enough. No, it's not. Children should not be afraid to go to public school. So what are we going to do about that? Are we not, as a school board, are you not going to talk about guns? Are you not going to talk about the issues that are relevant to us as a society? I think that's, as the board attorney, maybe I can lead you in that direction because I think that's relevant for school boards to talk about. I really do. And I'm passionate about those issues and tenacious and resilient. And some of the outcomes of these things are TBA, or TBD, to be determined. I mean, we don't know. But I think I could go on and on about what I believe are social political issues that school boards need to confront. And I think some of your boards in other counties have. They have in some way or another. A resolution from a school board does mean something. Words mean things. And there are people in groups that need to know that the school board supports them.
Tell us about a time when your initiative at work caused a change to occur. What was the situation and what was the outcome? You almost just answered that.
I kind of did. I mean, I will tell you that, and there's a lot of credit to go around, but one of the most obvious outcomes, I think, of some of the advocacy that I've done with others is the creation of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. I believe the situation, you all know the situation. I mean, we have a situation to confront in this community. And I have been, and just last week, went to the Stars Complex and spoke once again with Dr. Bohatch and others about the district and a passion for those issues. I think my initiative, I'm not going to take credit for all of it. I think I've been a participant in that. I've been a significant participant in the development of restorative practices in this school district. I kind of try to fly under the radar on some of these things because administrators need to take responsibility for them. But I am a strong advocate of not suspending students out of school. I am a strong advocate in doing everything we can to not expel students from school. Obviously, the Florida legislature has seen fit that if a child brings a firearm to school, they have to be expelled, and I respect that. However, giving children no chance is never a good thing. So those are a couple of things that I feel strongly about that I was involved in, if you would call them initiatives. I think I certainly was an integral part of them. Last one.
Would you please tell us anything you would like us to know about you that will aid us in making this decision?
About me? He regrets, so, no, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and toot my own horn. I will say this. I don't think there's any better person suited for this job than me. So I'll just tell you that. I believe in myself. As you can tell, I have a lot of love in my heart for what I do in this school district. And I think I'm the best candidate for the job. And 13 years from now, 14, 15 years from now, hopefully I'm still sitting in that position and all of you will look back. Maybe some of you will still be on the school board. I don't know what's going to happen with term limits. But, and you'll say, you know what? I'm glad we hired Rob to be the board attorney. That's all I have.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you
welcome.
very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Am I to leave?
Yes.
Okay.
I know you're gonna have a discussion, but I need to run to the restroom, but.
Okay.
But
We can
don't-
take a break.
Don't wait. if you don't-
Could,
Break. We should take a break.
same
Yeah,
thing too?
Go ahead.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you.
We'll take a 5-minute break.
Thank you. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Yes.
Well, you're quite attractive.
We're ready to resume.
Wind it up, baby.
Yes. So I am going to ask Dr. Pruitt to take us through what she would recommend as next steps for this process.
Well, I think at this time it would be appropriate to get feedback from the group and see what, if you can come to consensus on what you would like the next action to be.
Okay.
At this point, the choices would be to extend an offer to Mr. Dodig. That's one option. Another option is to take some time, think about it, and provide me feedback individually, to which then I could communicate to you as chair. Or you could determine at this time that you would wish to, the only other option would be to hire a search firm.
Okay. So, how many people would like to discuss what we've heard amongst our, I know some of you asked for a panel so that you'd have an opportunity to discuss, so I'm just sort of throwing it open to you all. What would you like to discuss with your colleagues about this appointment?
Well, one of the reasons I wanted to do a panel is because we're all asking the same question at the same time. We're hearing the same answer at the same time. So it makes it easier to ensure that we're all getting the same information appropriate. So I appreciate that. I also, you can get a lot about people, and I've sat in on other interviews with targeted questions with schools. And as we would do those, you get your answers, but there's a lot that happens from the demeanor and also interconnectedness with the people on the team. So that's one of the benefits I believe that we have from this. There were certain pieces that came through to me that I will share with you, and that was his passion definitely does come through. I like the fact I have often wanted to have more training than just ethics. I believe that that aspect of providing us some guidance and again, you don't want workshop to be just a workshop for a workshop, but I do believe that we all could benefit from learning more, and even beyond the ethics that we do get with FSBA, with our training. And the other part that came in to me was that I kept going back is, as he shared, you learned a lot about his character. And one's character is very important to me as I look at an attorney. And so that aspect came to me, that this is a man of character.
I guess the question I should have asked, is there anything we missed in the process of doing it this way that you wish we should have done or feel you need to do in order to make a decision about the board attorney?
Well, just for me, I have nothing to really compare to. That's probably the piece that I think is missing, unfortunately. We don't have another candidate to compare just that alone, and especially me being new, I feel that's not there for me to even to make a really full, I really like Rob. I don't have anything negative, but I don't have anything to compare it to. That's just my thing, I guess. I think that's my biggest piece for me, other than our present attorney, and then our experience with Rob. So I only have that. That's the only piece I have.
I mean, I can empathize with Melissa. I've had the ability to deal with a lot of board attorneys in the different school districts through the years, and some of them professionally, and actually Keith Martin's best friend there at Polk, I actually trained with him as a certified mediator, so we spent 2 weeks together. And surprisingly, the stories he told me about Keith never let on about that their relationship, but it's pretty interesting. A whole different side of Keith I learned that when I confronted him, I never seen Keith turn so red before, but it was quite amusing because the dynamics, the personalities between how quiet Wes is the complete antithesis of Keith, and for them to have served together in the military on the same JAG Corps, as close as they are, really is a yin and a yang. It's really, really interesting. But anyway, so I can understand Lisa. I guess my point with Robert or any in that position, we want to look at the skills of the candidate, the experience and knowledge, and not only experience of knowledge of as a board attorney, but also how he functions in legal aspects. And we've seen him, and Melissa's seen him for probably the youngest as a few, and Chris. Other of us have seen him for longer, but to see how adept he is with doing, he served as our own board attorney, several positions, but you've seen how he's handled with our students. So, I mean, we've really, as far as I don't think there is anybody out there in the state of Florida with the depth and breadth of skill and experience and knowledge. If that person were to come, if it were to be Paul Carlin from the West Coast, who was here now, he served over there, I don't think anyone would stack up to the credentials that we have with Mr. Dodig. The other part of it is the issue, and the biggest thing is I've seen a lot of people that I've known professionally in my prior lives, in manufacturing, that I know they're good because they're with a competitor. So I know what they can do, and I pull them into my company, and the one thing you don't know until they're in your organization is how do they fit? What's the synergy? What's their personality? How do you know what you're getting? And that's a huge wild card. And I've had people that I've dealt with for years that they were a client, they were a customer, that they were a supplier base, or on the other side, they were at both ends of up and down the chain. And I would pull them into my organization because they were that good. And it was just like a train wreck, and I'm like, holy cow, that I just didn't know that part about him working, in our organization. And I would come to me, my people would go, he's just not fitting. This is different with Rob because we've seen how he interacts with our staff. We've seen how he interacts with our superintendent and with our board for the most part. That's a really huge thing. So, I mean, I wasn't that much, as the process was going along, I didn't expect to have everybody fall out. But in reality, when I met with Dr. Pruitt with it, it really wasn't that much of a shock to me because all the people that apply just have no clue. They don't even know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And the ones that do know didn't apply because they know we're good, but he's better. So his colleagues didn't apply because they knew if we got in the ring, we're just really wasting our time and wasting you guys' time because that's really, he's the best guy for the job. And they all conceded that, even though that would have been your comparison, because I know there's certain people in smaller districts would say, well, they love to be at Lee County, but they're like, we can't compete with this dude because he's just got, he's been there for 13 years. He knows the skeletons, and particularly in Lee County, especially for the superintendents that we've seen fly through here like a revolving door, the history and the nuances and the uniqueness of Lee County, you can't find that anywhere. I mean, we've really got idiosyncrasies in our community. It is what it is. And if you don't understand them, when you're giving it legal advice, you're setting people up that it may be the right legal advice, but it's not weighted with the surroundings. You may really set this board up for something that's really going to blow up. And I think Lee County has benefited the fact that he's lived through some of this stuff. And the biggest one, for example, our whole desegregation order, all that experience, that's really a big deal. And for somebody to not understand it, that's, those are the priceless things that I don't think we get. But for Dodig, and like I said, Paul Carlin was the only one that I thought would even have a chance. We lost a really good attorney with Heather, and they found places. I mean, they got soaked up because we really had some good counsel in this district that left. And I don't want to.
And just so everybody, because I know some of you know this, but I mean, I did some proactive reaching out to some of these people, and that is exactly what they said, so that's been confirmed by people actually saying those words to me or to somebody on my staff. So just so you know that.
And it's different, and I should just couch the thing, in the legal, it's not like in a superintendent that they're not doing it because of the bias, because he's working here, that they don't feel they're applying, like the superintendent, the internal positions, because that's more political. This is more, in a legal level, it's where do I fit, as far as where do I stack up as far as horsepower. And that's the reason the lawyers wouldn't do it. And that's the same thing when you're applying for judges and stuff. People don't do it, and I'm not talking about not against a sitting judge, but if there's new people running for judgeships, they'll see somebody applying for a judgeship. They're not doing it because he's more politically active. It's just they know him, professionally, and know they don't match up, and people don't run. And so that's kind of how it is in the legal profession.
And I would just want to tag off of, if I may, what Steve said. I was appalled when I saw the applications of those who had applied, because it was clear they did not read what we were looking for. And I was just stunned, and I thought, if that's what we're getting, and I knew that you were definitely out there trying to see if anybody was willing to leave and come over here. So,
Well, and one more thing, I don't want to keep talking, I'll let Mary talk, I know, but in deference to what Pam's saying, those attorneys that applied, I don't fault them. People don't know. Melissa learned, Chris learned recently, I learned when I first came in. When I first came in, I had no idea what I didn't know. They have no idea how complex of an organization and an entity this is. And when you get in there, it blows your mind. And they don't even know. They're thinking in their little legal realm, they don't even know what they're getting themselves into.
So you guys know I'm a note taker, so I wrote some words down. I think Rob is a great communicator. And I think as far as his character, he really lays himself out there. He is motivated, I think, to take us forward, even in our personal conversation. He talked about how this district really does have a need to grow up, and I think he repeated it here. And he has a plan for that. So, I think that's important. He has experience, he's accomplished a lot, and he definitely has the skills. I don't know if we went out and looked some more, if we were going to get anything better than what we saw in that folder for the people who applied previously. He knows the district, he has the institutional knowledge, and he certainly has a passion for, this is his home, and he has a passion for the job. And it seems to me like he's been thinking about this, for quite a while. And I definitely felt confident when I had the experience for a couple of years when I was the legislative liaison. I could not have done that effectively without him. And he does his homework. He was very thorough and made everything easy to comprehend. So I really think that he can be a leader and help us and advise us ahead of time about things that we need to know about. Because I'll go back to the testing vote. Had I been fully informed before that, things may have been different. Yeah.
Well, I asked the question, did we miss anything? Do people feel that we need to continue the process with respect to we've missed something in this interview, or we've missed something in the process of doing this? Then my other question would be, is there something the candidate doesn't have that we feel we need that's essential as we go forward, that would cause us to, feel obligated to continue?
Silver bullets.
Okay, so Mrs. Patricia, I haven't heard from you. We haven't heard from you.
Public panel interviews make me very uncomfortable. I think that I don't really have much to add. I think that the reason why we don't have other applicants is because they saw the writing on the wall. And I don't mean, he was the heir apparent and we were going to give him the job no matter what. I think they looked at their resumes and compared them to him. And I think that hiring a headhunter to come in and help us find somebody out of state is a giant waste of time, because that person getting up to speed on Florida law is going to set us back. It's not going to move us forward. So, you know, I initially was very disappointed that we only had one qualified applicant, but then I realized what was happening. I'm not going to apply for a job I know I'm not going to get. I'm not going to apply for a job against a guy who's so respected that, and I'm talking respect across the state. You know, I'm not talking about respect here. I'm talking about his colleagues across the state. They get it. They're not going to apply because they know he's best for the position. So that's my feedback.
Okay, so I guess what we do then is we make a recommendation. I don't know how this works because I've never hired anybody, but do we look to you to make a recommendation, or how does it work? It goes on the
So
consent agenda?
I will, based on the conversation, I will make a recommendation that, that you move forward with the motion to begin negotiations with Mr. Dodig for the position of board attorney. I believe it is appropriate that it can be done similarly to your other employee, and so that Mr. Martin, since he's still here, and I know there was some conversation around probably not as much of a need for overlap, but now Angela has to find a staff attorney. So anyway, so, you know, the sooner we can begin that process, I feel the better. And then maybe some conversation around the parameters of that negotiation and what this group is, what it, you know, how you want that to happen.
Can we do what we did with Dr. Atkins, which is see the contract? That, do we have we received his contract?
I don't know if you have.
Got it. I know I've seen it.
Initial, way back you might have.
And we've seen it recently, too, when it came to, I want to say, thinking about job description, exactly.
Okay.
And I know we've done the ERI and comparables across the state relative to that position, so we can, you know, re-provide that if that would be helpful. So, but just some direction around how you want that to take place.
So job description, whatever evaluation is done, the current contract in place, and comparables, if you could get that out to all of us. So today is Tuesday?
16th.
I don't even know. What is it, Wednesday?
Say, isn't it Wednesday?
Wednesday the 16th. Wednesday the 16th.
So we can add it for motion on Tuesday's meeting?
Yeah, if we,
Get it, well, good cause.
Good, good.
Okay,
yeah,
all right,
that should be the goal.
May I make a comment?
yeah.
Dr. Pruitt, I know that you have had to run searches for really important jobs. Not that every job in the district isn't very important, but really important jobs. And you have brought us people like Dr. Creel and Trey Davis, and I'm 100% certain that you're going to bring just as qualified a candidate to replace, you know, to get us a good staff attorney who's going to help move us forward. So I know the work is hard, and I know that you don't sleep anymore. But I do appreciate what you're doing. I really do.
Thank you.
Well said. Thank you.
I just have a question. Do we get any input from the candidate regarding if they have any requests contract-wise?
It would be the same as you're doing with your other employee. He or his representative would work with Mr. Martin to negotiate that. So, yeah, and again, I'll talk to the candidate and I'll, you know, do that, so, to help facilitate the conversation.
Any other
Okay,
comments?
so tell me, you want the job description, current contract. I know we did discuss redoing that evaluation at the same time,
Yeah,
so.
let's not, you know what, let's not muddy the water.
Okay.
Let's hold the evaluation, because it's not really a good one, so.
But I can begin that work in the background.
that's fine.
And then the comparables,
Yeah.
okay.
And then I would say if we're aiming for Tuesday, today is Wednesday, so we've got to get comments to Keith, well, let's say by, how quickly can you get this out to us? By tomorrow, by today?
I can,
Whoa, wait a minute, wait, the one going forward on Tuesday is only to begin negotiations, but we don't have to do our comments yet until we get, because she'll start negotiations, she'll start her process, that won't be for 2 weeks after
Yeah, so you'll do, at the Tuesday's meeting, what I see happening is the recommendation to move forward with negotiations.
Oh,
And then we'll
okay.
do the same. I'll get that information out to you if,
Like a week
I'll
from
get, I know we have some contracts, because I know some of you like to see the contracts of comparable folks, so we can see what we can do there.
All right, so we're talking then about finalizing this at the same time of
Yes, what you-
finalizing the
yes, yes, it did,
superintendent's
yes, it
contract,
did.
correct?
I can call.
Well, you,
I figured that out.
really, if you wanted to, we could, you could do that at the June 26th for a July 1 start. That would give you a month overlap, and that would provide me time to do a search for a staff attorney. So there isn't as much of a
Okay.
rush, but we could, if we can good cause that recommendation, then we can at least have a month for the, bless you, for the negotiation to take place.
Bless you.
Okay. All right,
Anything else?
anything else?
I just want to say really quick that I feel really good about hiring Rob. So for me, I feel like if I have a question, I feel like that I can go to him and he's going to be easier to speak to. I haven't always felt like that. So just, maybe it's because I know him a little bit better, I feel like, but his personality is very, very welcoming, and so I did want to add that. I didn't want to,
Good.
wanted you to understand that about me.
All right.
Great.
All right, seeing nothing else?
Give you these, or?
Yes, I'm okay if you haven't circled numbers. You can just give me what you have, and that will be perfectly appropriate. So whatever you have, you can give to me now.
Okay. Any other business? No? Seeing none, then this is adjourned.